I didn't plan on finding out the way I did. No one ever does, right? But it's not every day you see your wife sitting in some guy's lap, all smiles and whispers, at a party you were never supposed to attend. It was a Thursday. Not that the day mattered, but Thursdays were usually pretty uneventful for me: work, home, maybe a beer with my buddy Greg at the bar before heading back to the usual grind. Nothing out of the ordinary. That night, though, Greg dragged me to some networking event, a mix of half-drunk professionals and wannabe entrepreneurs trying to impress each other. I wasn't interested. I was already mentally checked out, planning how quickly I could make an excuse to leave. Then, I saw her. My wife, Katie, in that familiar little black dress I bought her for our anniversary last year, laughing with a drink in hand, completely unaware that I was standing a few feet away. It wasn't the sight of her at the party that threw me off. I mean, we'd been married long enough to trust each other's social lives, but it was the way she was sitting, legs crossed over some guy's lap, fingers lightly brushing his neck like it was the most natural thing in the world. And the look on her face, a kind of playful flirtation, like she wasn't married, like I didn't exist. My heart didn't drop. That's too easy, too clean. No, it felt more like someone had sucker punched me in the gut, leaving me standing there, winded, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I wasn't the jealous type, not even close, but there's a line, and she was way past it. The worst part? She didn't even notice me at first. I just stood there, invisible, watching my wife act like I was a ghost. That's how it all started. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. There was too much to process, and I wasn't going to make a scene in front of strangers. So, I left. Walked straight out of that crowded room and into the cold air outside. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was from anger or the fact that my entire world had just shifted. But I didn't even call her. I went home, sat in the dark, and tried to make sense of it. The next day, I acted like nothing had happened. I waited for her to come home from work, watched her smile and talk like everything was normal. It felt surreal, watching her go through her routine, pretending she hadn't spent the previous night draped all over some other guy. I wanted to believe it was just some weird misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment, something stupid. Maybe she'd been drunk. Maybe the guy was just a friend. All these stupid thoughts kept circling in my head, and I hated myself for trying to excuse it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I waited until she was in the shower. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter, open, logged in, like it always was. Katie wasn't tech-savvy, never bothered with passwords or hiding anything. But this time, I needed to see. I couldn't just let it slide. I clicked through her emails, her calendar, nothing unusual. But then I opened the Messages app. There it was. Dozens of conversations, all with the same guy. His name was Luke. They'd been meeting for months, lunches, late-night drinks, even a weekend work trip she'd mentioned a few weeks back. The messages weren't just casual banter either. It was clear. The flirting, the inside jokes, the plans to meet again. The way she talked to him, it was familiar, intimate in a way that hit me hard. This wasn't just some random hookup. I shut the laptop. My heart was pounding, but I didn't feel anything. Not yet. That would come later. I waited until dinner. We were sitting across from each other, like we had hundreds of times before, but this time the food tasted like nothing. She was chatting about her day, about some colleague at work, oblivious. I couldn't take it anymore. So, how's Luke? I asked, staring straight at her. The change in her face was instant. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. She looked at me, then quickly looked down at her plate, like maybe if she didn't make eye contact, this wasn't really happening. "What are you talking about?" she said, but her voice had this shaky edge to it. I didn't answer. I just kept staring. The silence stretched out, long enough for her to realize I wasn't bluffing. She tried again. "I don't know what you mean," she said, this time softer, like she was already preparing to lie, but unsure how deep to go. "You're lying." My voice came out calm. I wasn't calm. I know. I saw the messages. All of it. Her fork clattered against the plate. She stared at me for a second, then dropped the act. "It's not what you think," she started, but I cut her off. Don't even try." I pushed my chair back and stood up, pacing the kitchen, trying to control myself. She was watching me, eyes wide, maybe scared for the first time since this whole thing started. "We're just friends, I swear," she said, standing up too, trying to close the distance between us. I backed away. "It's just been. I don't know, things haven't been the same with us lately. I didn't know how to talk to you, and look, he listens to me. That's all it is. I swear to God, nothing else has happened." Her words started to run together, this frantic explanation, trying to justify it all. I didn't care. The excuses were just noise. "Shut up," I said, and she froze. "You've been meeting him. Don't lie. I've seen enough." She was crying now, her voice cracking, but I wasn't moved. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't. I love you, I swear. It was just." I cut her off again, louder this time. "I don't care. Do you get that? I don't care what you meant. You've been screwing around behind my back. I saw the messages. How long has it been going on?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, sobbing, and that silence told me everything. I left the house that night without saying anything else. She tried to call after me, but I didn't care to hear another word. I needed space, needed to get my head clear, but more than that, I needed to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. Over the next few days, I didn't come home much. I stayed out late, crashed at Greg's place, made excuses to the kids that I had work stuff to handle. But I wasn't just hiding. I was planning. See, I'm not the kind of guy who lets things slide. Katie had destroyed something between us, something that couldn't just be patched up with tears and apologies. She thought she could play me for a fool. I wasn't about to let that go unpunished. Katie didn't know that the house was in my name alone. When we bought it, her credit was crap, so it made sense for me to handle the paperwork. It gave me an idea. If she wanted to play games, I could play harder. I went straight to a lawyer and started the process to put the house up for sale. Without telling her. If she wanted to sneak around behind my back, I'd show her what it felt like to lose control. Then I went a step further. I cleared out half the money from our joint account. Transferred it to a separate one she had no access to. She'd notice eventually, but by then, it wouldn't matter. I wasn't going to leave her with anything. I let the real estate agents handle the details of selling the house while I made a few arrangements. Moved some of my stuff to a storage unit and started looking for a new place. I wasn't interested in a messy, drawn-out fight. I wanted to be 2 steps ahead, to take away everything she thought she could count on. When I finally came home after a week of staying away, Katie looked worn down, like she hadn't slept in days. She tried to act relieved, like maybe we could finally talk things out. She had no idea what was coming. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice small, desperate. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, just handling some things," I said casually. "By the way, we're selling the house. Already got the paperwork started." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "You heard me," I said, leaning against the counter. "The house is going on the market. Should get a good price for it, too. Better start packing your things." She stared at me, confused, trying to process. "You can't just." "I can. It's my name on the title. And while we're at it, don't bother checking the bank account. Took my share. You'll have to figure the rest out." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time, I didn't care. Not even a little. She wasn't going to talk her way out of this. A few days later, she finally broke. I came home late, like I had been doing since this whole thing started, and found her waiting for me in the living room. She looked worse than before, eyes red, hair a mess, clutching some crumpled tissue like it could hold her together. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but I could tell she was barely holding it together. I sat down across from her, not saying anything. I was done playing the game. She wanted to talk? Fine. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking a bit. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but we need to figure out what happens next. What happens with us? I stared at her for a moment, wondering if she actually believed there was still an us left to save. There's no us anymore, Katie. You destroyed that. What do you want me to say? That I'll just get over it? Pretend like this didn't happen? She flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. She needed to hear it. You didn't just screw up. You betrayed me. Lied to me, 4 months, probably longer. So don't sit there and tell me you're sorry like it's some kind of accident. I didn't mean to fall for him, she blurted out. It just happened. Things between us haven't been right for a while, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. There it was. The excuse. She wasn't even blaming herself. She was blaming us, like our marriage falling apart was some natural disaster she had no control over. It made me sick. I don't care why you did it, I said coldly. You could have talked to me. We could have figured it out. But you chose to go behind my back. That's on you. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but it wasn't moving me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt hollow. What do you want? I asked, tired of the back and forth. Do you want to fix this? Do you think we can fix this? She shook her head, wiping her eyes with the tissue. I don't know. I don't know if we can. But I still love you. I do. I laughed at that. A bitter, empty laugh. You don't love me. You love the idea of not being the bad guy in this. You want me to forgive you so you don't have to feel guilty anymore. But it doesn't work like that. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything settle in. We're done, Katie. I'm filing for divorce. You can keep saying you're sorry, but it's not going to change anything. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, tears falling, and for the first time, I think she realized how final this was. Take whatever you want from the house, I said, heading toward the door. But I'm done. I didn't look back when I walked out of the room that night. I'd said what I needed to say, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not peace, there was nothing peaceful about what had happened, but a quiet understanding that this was the end, and there was no turning back. Over the next few days, I filed for divorce. It was as clean and direct as I could make it. No dragging it out. No mess. I kept the house sale going, kept my distance from Katie, only communicating through lawyers when we had to. She didn't fight much. Maybe she knew it was pointless, or maybe she just didn't have the energy left. The anger I'd been carrying around started to fade. It didn't vanish overnight, but it dulled into something more manageable. I wasn't waking up every morning, fists clenched, thinking about how to hurt her back. I'd already done what I needed to do. I'd taken control, stripped her of everything she thought was stable, and made sure she felt the weight of her betrayal. But the truth is, once you've made your move, once you've exacted your revenge, you start to realize it's not as satisfying as you expect. You don't get to rewind time. I thought about what Katie had said in that last conversation, about still loving me, about not knowing how to fix things. It stuck with me, not because I believed her, but because it made me realize something. I'd spent so much time thinking about how she had ruined everything, how she had crossed the line. But when I looked back at the last year, the cracks were there long before she made that choice. We stopped talking, really talking, long before Luke ever came into the picture. We got comfortable in our routines, living together but drifting further apart. I don't say this to excuse her, there's no excuse for what she did, but it made me see how things had slowly fallen apart. It made me realize how easy it is to slip into that distance without even noticing. The divorce went through quietly. She moved out, and we split the rest of our things. I kept the house, the one she thought we were selling, because at the end of the day, I wanted my kids to have stability. They didn't need to be dragged into the mess of our lives. As for me, I'm not sure what's next. I haven't thought that far ahead. What I do know is that I'll be more careful next time, if there ever is a next time. I won't let things slip away unnoticed, and I won't ignore the signs when they show up. I've learned that when trust is broken, you can't rebuild it. No matter how much you want to, no matter how much you try. And maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. Sometimes, no matter how much you think you know someone, they'll still find a way to surprise you. And when they do, all you can do is move on.